Before the wedding, my fiancé Ethan had sent me abroad to visit an exhibition. He knew how much I loved art and encouraged me to go see a show in New York, a city I had always dreamed of visiting. He assured me that it would be a great break for me and that we could focus on our wedding plans when I returned. I thought it was an innocent gesture, a way for me to have some time to myself before the big day. I spent my days lost in the art world, surrounded by masterpieces that left me in awe. Each day, I would send Ethan updates about my experience, sharing my thoughts and excitement. I knew our wedding was just 2.5 weeks away, but I wasn't worried. Ethan had suggested we could take our wedding photos later, even during our honeymoon. It felt like a perfect plan. Our future together was taking shape in my mind, and everything seemed to fall into place. But when I landed back, home, everything changed. I had planned to surprise Ethan with a homecoming filled with love and excitement. I was going to rush into his arms and tell him how much I had missed him. Instead, when I checked my phone, I saw a video from my best friend, Sarah. She'd been out of town visiting her family and had accidentally stumbled upon a wedding. It was Ethan's wedding, but he wasn't standing next to me. He was standing next to Lily, a woman I had never met. The video showed them in the exact suit and dress that I had picked out for our own wedding. Ethan's smile, the same smile I had imagined sharing with him on our big day, was now directed at someone else. Lily, the woman in the video, was wearing the wedding dress I had chosen. She looked frail, almost sickly, but she was there, standing next to Ethan, in the life I had dreamed for myself. I felt my stomach churn. Sarah had been worried and didn't want to tell me directly at first. She'd only shown me the video after she picked me up from the airport. Her eyes were filled with concern as I watched the footage, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. I had to understand what was going on. My mind raced with 1,000 questions. How could this happen? Why didn't Ethan tell me? Why wasn't I there? I could barely breathe as I stared at the video on my phone. It felt like a punch to the gut, like everything I had planned for and dreamed about had suddenly evaporated. Ethan, the man I had been preparing to marry, was not mine anymore. He was someone else's groom, standing at the altar with Lily, wearing the suit I had chosen, smiling the way he was supposed to smile at me. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, struggling to process what I was seeing. My hands shook, the tremors spreading up my arms as I rewound the footage and watched it again. Ethan, the man I had trusted with my heart, the one I had imagined spending the rest of my life with, was now exchanging vows with someone else. He had taken the suit I had chosen for him, the one I had envisioned him wearing as we stood together at our wedding. He was wearing it for her, not for me. Lily, the woman beside him, looked fragile. She was thinner than I had imagined, her body barely holding itself up in the dress I had once dreamed of seeing myself in. She was wearing the same gown I had picked for myself, the same one that had made me feel like a princess when I first saw it. Now that dress, that perfect vision I had created for my wedding day, was draped over her frame. The moment I had imagined countless times, the moment I had dreamed of my whole life, was being lived out by someone else. Ethan had chosen her, not me. It was almost as if my entire future had been hijacked. The woman in the video was wearing my dreams, standing in my place, in the life I had built in my mind. The smile on Ethan's face, the way he looked at Lily, it all felt so wrong. It was supposed to be me. The plans we had made, the future we had talked about so often, were now nothing more than a fantasy, shattered in an instant. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to understand what had happened. How could Ethan do this? How could he marry someone else while I was away? Why wasn't I there to share that moment with him? I had spent so much time imagining our future together, planning every detail of our wedding, and now all of that had been ripped away. The video played over and over in my mind, each time more painful than the last. Ethan had promised we would have our wedding photos when I came back. He had said we would plan everything together, take our time, make it special. But now Here he was, exchanging vows with Lily in the same venue, wearing the same suit, standing beside her in the dress I had picked for myself. It was as though I had been replaced, a second choice, and all my dreams and plans no longer mattered. I stared at the phone screen, feeling a tightness in my chest. The reality of what I was seeing was hard to accept. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to acknowledge that Ethan had been hiding something from me. How could he not tell me? How could he marry someone else without even mentioning it? I felt betrayed, hurt, and so confused. I had loved him so much. We had talked about our wedding for months, choosing every detail together. We had planned our honeymoon in New York, a dream vacation for both of us, to celebrate the beginning of our life together. But now, that dream was shattered, replaced by a harsh reality I couldn't yet comprehend. Sarah, my best friend, had been the one to find the video. She had been visiting her family and had stumbled upon the wedding, recognizing Ethan in the crowd. She had seen the bride, Lily, and immediately reached out to me. At first, she hadn't wanted to tell me directly, unsure of how to break the news. But after I landed back in town, she had met me at the airport and showed me the video, her face full of concern. "What are you going to do now?" Sarah had asked, her voice trembling as she looked at me. Her eyes were wide with worry, unsure of how to handle the situation. I didn't have an answer. I couldn't even find the words. How could I move forward from this? How could I face Ethan after everything he had done? How could I reconcile the man I thought I knew with the person I saw in the video, exchanging vows with someone else, wearing the dress I had picked out, living the life I had imagined for myself? It wasn't just about the dress or the wedding or the plans we had made. It was about trust, about love, about everything we had built together. And now, all of that was gone. My heart felt like it was breaking, and I didn't know how to put it back together. My mind was racing, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. I felt betrayed, shattered by the reality of what I had just witnessed. How could Ethan do this to me? Why didn't he tell me what was going on? I had spent the entire week abroad thinking about him, sending him messages about my excitement to return, eager to start planning the life we had talked about. And now, here he was, marrying someone else. I thought about the plans we had made, the wedding that was supposed to be ours. We had already booked the venue, chosen the photographers, the menu, the dress. Everything was falling apart. How could I face him now? Could I even look him in the eye after what he had done? The wedding I had envisioned for myself, the life I had pictured with Ethan, was slipping through my fingers like sand. Everything had been taken from me without warning. I was supposed to be the one wearing that dress, standing beside him as his bride. But instead, it was Lily, the woman who had somehow taken my place in every way, wearing the dress I had dreamed of, standing in the life that was meant to be mine. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I had trusted Ethan. I had believed in him, in us. We had spent so many years building our future together, and now it felt like it was all for nothing. Was it really just a lie? Were we ever truly in love, or was I just a temporary distraction, a placeholder until Lily could come into the picture? The thought made my chest tighten, and a feeling of emptiness began to settle in my heart. I knew I had to talk to him. I had to hear his side of the story, no matter how painful it might be. I couldn't just let this go. I had invested so much into our relationship, into the future we were supposed to share. I needed to know the truth, even if it meant confronting Ethan about his betrayal. "Sarah," I said quietly, breaking the silence that had fallen between us. "I need to talk to him. I can't just walk away without knowing what happened. I need him to explain. I need to hear it from him." Sarah looked at me with concern in her eyes. She could see how much I was struggling, how much I was torn between the love I had for Ethan and the hurt he had caused. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "Do you think you'll get the answers you need? Or will it just make everything worse?" I didn't know the answer. I wasn't sure what Ethan could say to make this all right, but I couldn't just keep running from it. I had to face him. I had to know if there was a chance for us, or if it was all over for good. I have to, I said, more to myself than to Sarah. I need closure. I need to hear him say it. I need to know if I was ever really part of his life, or if I was just a placeholder until something better came along. Sarah didn't say anything else, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She was my best friend, and she knew how much I had invested in this relationship. She knew how deeply I had loved Ethan, but even she couldn't deny the truth that was staring us both in the face. As the days passed, I became more and more determined to confront Ethan. I couldn't let this go, not without hearing his explanation. I needed to know why he had done this to me. It wasn't just about the wedding or the dress or the plans we had made together. It was about the trust we had built, the love we had shared, and now it all felt like it had been nothing but a lie. The days after I saw the video felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about everything that had happened. The anger simmered beneath the surface, and with every passing hour it grew stronger. But I couldn't just sit in silence. I had to confront Ethan. I had to know why he had done this, why he had chosen Lily over me. He had promised me a future together, a life filled with love and happiness. Now that future seemed like a cruel joke. I didn't know what to expect when I finally saw him again. Would he try to explain himself? Would he apologize? Or would he just keep making excuses like he always did? I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't go on pretending like nothing had happened. I gathered my courage and made my way to his apartment. As I walked up to the door, my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. I couldn't let him get away with what he had done. When he opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the look on his face. It was the same face I had loved, the one I had seen so many times before. But now, it looked different. There was a sadness in his eyes, a guilt that I hadn't seen before. For a moment, I wondered if he had truly regretted his actions. But then I remembered the video, the wedding, the woman standing beside him. I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking, "we need to talk." He looked at me for a moment, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Then he stepped aside and gestured for me to come in. I walked past him, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. This was supposed to be our home. We were supposed to be building a life together, but now it felt like a stranger's place, a place where nothing was as it seemed. We sat down on the couch, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened, and it was suffocating. "I saw the video," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I saw you getting married to Lily." Ethan's face went pale. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He looked down at his hands, and for a moment I thought he might break down. But then he spoke, his voice shaky. "Emma, I never wanted this to happen," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "Lily, she's been sick for so long. She didn't have much time left. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt you." I felt a coldness wash over me. The explanation was not what I had expected. It wasn't the truth I had hoped for. His words didn't make sense. He didn't want to hurt me, yet he had gone ahead and married someone else without telling me. He didn't want to hurt me, but he had taken everything from me. "I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "You promised me we would be together. You promised me a future. And now you're telling me that you married her because she was sick? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know?" Ethan stood up, pacing the room as he tried to explain himself. His words were a jumble of excuses, each one more confusing than the last. He kept telling me that he had married Lily out of love, that he was just trying to fulfill her last wish, but none of it made sense. He was trying to justify what he had done, but it didn't feel like an explanation. It felt like a betrayal. "I thought I could handle both of you," Ethan said finally, his voice shaking. "I thought I could marry you and still be there for her. But I couldn't. I never wanted to hurt you, Emma. I thought if I married her, it would make things easier for everyone. I thought I could fix everything." "Fix everything?" I repeated, incredulous. "You don't fix things by lying to me, by marrying someone else while I was away. You don't fix things by taking away everything we built together." Ethan stood there, silent, his head hanging low. I could see the regret in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the hurt he had caused, the trust he had broken. I had spent years with him, planning our future, believing in our love, and now it was all gone. I stood up, my body trembling with emotion. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I can't be with someone. Who would betray me like this?" As I turned to leave, I heard him call my name, but I didn't stop. There was nothing he could say now. It was over. The days following my confrontation with Ethan were some of the most painful I had ever experienced. I couldn't escape the weight of what he had done, nor the crushing realization that our entire future had been built on lies. I had always believed in him, in us, but now everything felt like it was falling apart. Each moment that passed made the betrayal feel deeper, the wounds more raw. I tried to hold it together, to remain strong, but I felt like I was drowning in confusion and heartbreak. Ethan had promised me everything. He had promised we would be together forever, that we would build a life and a home and share our dreams. But now I was left alone, wondering if any of it had ever been real. His explanation that he had married Lily because she was dying felt like an excuse, a desperate attempt to justify his actions, and I wasn't sure if I could accept it. I spent my nights in the small apartment we had shared, staring at the empty walls, unable to find peace. Sarah tried to comfort me, but it was hard for her to understand the pain I was going through. She saw it as betrayal, as something unforgivable, and I agreed with her. But even though I knew I had every right to be angry, a part of me still loved Ethan. A part of me still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had truly cared for me. But every time I thought about him, about the life we had planned, the image of him standing beside Lily in that video, the same suit, the same smile, took over my thoughts. It was impossible to ignore. He had moved on and I was left behind. I wasn't sure what I expected from him, but when I finally received a message from him, my heart twisted. The words were simple, but they hit me like a freight train. "Emma, I'm sorry. I still love you. Please forgive me. I don't want to lose you." It was the same message he had sent me a dozen times, over and over again. Each time I had hoped that this time it would be different, that he would come to his senses and realize the damage he had done. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't go back to him. Not after what he had done. Not after the way he had discarded me without a second thought. "Please forgive me," the message repeated. "We can still have the future we dreamed of. I promise." The words felt hollow. I couldn't erase the image of Lily standing in my place. I couldn't forget the way Ethan had acted like nothing was wrong, as if everything was still the same. He had lied to me, kept secrets, and made promises he never intended to keep. As I read the message, a sense of finality washed over me. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't go back to him, even if I still loved him. It was time to move on. It was time to take back my life. I deleted the message without responding. There was nothing left to say. The more I thought about Ethan's message, the more it felt like a desperate attempt to patch up the cracks in his actions. He had already shattered the foundation of our relationship, and now he was asking me to forgive him as though nothing had happened. I couldn't even fathom how he thought this would work. I couldn't pretend that I hadn't seen the video or that I hadn't felt the crushing weight of betrayal every time I thought about it. He had married Lily without telling me, without a single word of warning. The more I tried to rationalize it, the angrier I became. Ethan had chosen Lily, and not just for a fleeting moment. He had promised her a future that was supposed to be mine. He had taken everything that was supposed to be ours and handed it to her, as if my love, my dreams, and my plans meant nothing. I couldn't just let him get away with this. I had to take action. I couldn't let him think that everything was okay, that I was simply going to move on like nothing had happened. So I made the decision to file a lawsuit. I was going to get back the money I had spent on the wedding, on the house we had bought together. I was going to make sure he understood that there would be consequences for his actions. I had already started contacting lawyers when the public started to learn about Ethan's marriage. At first, it seemed like a quiet affair, a small wedding with just a handful of people. But as soon as the news spread, it became a topic of conversation in my circles. My friends started to whisper about it, asking questions, gossiping about what had really happened. I hadn't told them the full story yet, but I knew they had heard the rumors. Some of them had already seen the video. The more I tried to keep it together, the more everything fell apart. People started reaching out to me, offering their sympathy, their support, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to make up for the fact that Ethan had betrayed me, that he had gone ahead with his wedding while I was away, living the life I thought we had been building together. It wasn't enough to simply say, "I'm sorry," and expect everything to go back to normal. Sarah, who had been with me through all of this, had her own thoughts about the situation. She was livid. "He doesn't deserve your forgiveness, Emma," she said one night as we sat together, trying to make sense of it all. "He's made his choice, and it's not you. Don't let him walk all over you. You deserve so much better than this." Her words were like a balm for my wounds, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I had friends who supported me, who saw the truth of what had happened. They didn't try to make excuses for Ethan. They didn't tell me to just forget about it and move on. They told me to stand up for myself, to take control of my life again. And that's exactly what I did. I called a lawyer the next day. I wasn't going to let Ethan get away with his actions. If he thought he could just erase everything we had and move on with Lily, he was mistaken. I was going to make sure I got my fair share, even if it meant going to court. The decision to take legal action wasn't easy, but it felt like the only way forward. I couldn't keep letting Ethan get away with what he had done. He had lied to me, betrayed my trust, and broken everything we had built together. I wasn't about to let him erase the reality of our relationship just because he had chosen Lily. So I went to my parents and told them everything. They were shocked, of course, but they understood. They didn't question me or try to convince me to forgive him. They knew how much Ethan meant to me, but they also knew that I deserved better than someone who would betray me so casually. That evening, we gathered at the family dinner table, my parents, my aunt, and my cousin. The conversation turned serious as soon as my dad asked, "So what are you going to do now?" "I'm going to court," I said flatly. "I'm going to get back what's mine." My parents didn't hesitate. My mom, who had always been the calm one, squeezed my hand and said, "We'll support you, Emma. You don't have to do this alone." "Of course not," my dad added, his voice firm. "Ethan is our responsibility now. We'll make sure he understands that he can't just treat you like this." I hadn't expected them to be so supportive. I had expected them to be disappointed, to tell me to try to work it out with Ethan, to give him another chance, but instead they were resolute. They didn't even try to sugarcoat things. They knew what Ethan had done, and they weren't going to let him get away with it either. We didn't just talk about the legal side of things. My dad also suggested that we go over to Ethan's family's house and speak with them. "This isn't just between you and Ethan anymore," he said. "It's time they knew the truth. If they care about him, they'll want to help him see how wrong this was." So the next day, we gathered the family and made our way to Ethan's parents' house. It wasn't far, just a short drive from where I lived. I could feel the tension building as we approached. I didn't want to confront them, but I knew it was necessary. Ethan's family had to know what he had done, and they needed to understand the impact it had on me, on all of us. When we arrived, Ethan's mother greeted us at the door, her smile faltering when she saw the serious look on my dad's face. "What's going on?" she asked, clearly sensing something was wrong. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice as steady as ever. "It's about Ethan." The room fell silent as we sat down. I had prepared myself for this moment, but the reality of it was still overwhelming. As we started to tell them everything, about the wedding, the lies, the betrayal, I could see the shock on their faces. Ethan's mother, who had always been warm and welcoming, looked as though she had been slapped. She was clearly devastated by the news. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I never thought he would do something like this." Ethan's father was silent, his face red with anger. I had never seen him so upset. He kept his gaze focused on the floor, his fists clenched. "I'll talk to him," he muttered, barely looking at me. "This is not how we raised him." "Good," my father said firmly. "He needs to understand the consequences of his actions." As we left their house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation had been a necessary one. Ethan's family had to face the truth, just like I had. But even though they seemed regretful, it didn't change the fact that Ethan had hurt me deeply. No amount of apologies, no amount of regret could erase the pain he had caused. The truth about Ethan's actions spread quickly through both our circles, and the fallout was even worse than I could have imagined. The messages started flooding in, some sympathetic, others filled with judgment and disbelief. It seemed like everyone had an opinion on what had happened, and no one was afraid to share it. Friends of mine who had always supported Ethan were now questioning his choices, some of them reaching out to me in disbelief. Others, like Sarah, were more direct, urging me to stand my ground, to demand justice for what he had done. I didn't know how to process it all. One minute I was being comforted by my family, the next I was bombarded by a constant stream of texts, phone calls, and visits. Most of my friends were on my side. They couldn't understand how Ethan could have done what he did, but there were a few who, despite everything, still tried to defend him, arguing that he had acted out of compassion for Lily, that his intentions were good. Those were the conversations that frustrated me the most. They didn't get it. They didn't understand how it felt to have the man you loved, the man you had built a future with, marry someone else while you were away. Compassion didn't erase betrayal, and nothing could justify what Ethan had done. I had always believed in Ethan. I had believed in us, in the life we had planned. But now, it felt like everything had been built on lies. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people who had once been closest to me. Sarah had been the only person who truly understood the depth of my pain, but even she couldn't provide me with the answers I needed. No one could. The truth was that Ethan had made a decision, and I was no longer part of it. As the days passed, I began to see Ethan in a different light. The man I thought I knew, the man I had loved, seemed to have disappeared. All that was left was a stranger who had made choices that hurt me in ways I couldn't explain. And as much as I still cared about him, I couldn't go back to someone who had betrayed me so completely. But Ethan didn't give up. He kept sending me messages, trying to justify his actions, telling me he still loved me, that he had never stopped caring about me. It was the same thing over and over again. "I'm sorry, Emma. Please forgive me. We can still be together." At first, I thought about responding, about telling him how much I was hurting, how his betrayal had shattered me. But then I realized that doing so would only allow him to keep controlling the situation. I couldn't let him do that. I couldn't let him manipulate me into feeling sorry for him. He had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. So I stopped responding. I deleted his messages without a second thought. I had to cut the tie for my own sake. As much as it hurt, I knew it was the only way to move forward. There would be no more second chances, no more excuses. I couldn't be with someone who had already chosen someone else. The days that followed were both a blur and an eternity. It was as if time had stopped, and yet it moved forward without any regard for what I was feeling. I spent my time in a haze, going through the motions of my daily routine while my heart and mind were elsewhere. Ethan's messages continued to flood my phone, but I had stopped reading them. I knew what he was trying to do, to manipulate me into believing that things could go back to how they were, but they couldn't. They never would. I tried to focus on work, on anything that could take my mind off the constant ache in my chest. But no matter where I went, no matter what I did, Ethan was always there, a shadow in the corner of my mind, a reminder of everything I had lost. It wasn't just the wedding that was gone. It was the life we had planned, the future I had believed in. It was everything. I started to realize that I didn't just feel betrayed by Ethan. I felt betrayed by the world. How had I let myself be fooled for so long? How had I not seen the cracks in our relationship? Had I been so blinded by love that I had missed all the signs? I couldn't stop questioning myself, wondering if there was something I had missed, some way I could have prevented all of this. But the truth was, there was nothing I could have done. Ethan had made his choice, and I couldn't change that. One day, as I sat in my apartment staring blankly at the wall, Sarah came over to check on me. She had been my rock throughout all of this, but even she was starting to see how deep the wound had gone. She had tried to comfort me, to tell me that things would get better, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She knew that I wasn't just mourning the loss of Ethan, I was mourning the loss of everything I had believed to be true. "You need to stop letting him control your life, Emma," Sarah said, sitting down beside me on the couch. "He's already taken enough from you. Don't let him take your peace, too." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had been letting Ethan control my emotions, my thoughts, my actions. I had been letting him dictate how I felt, how I reacted, and how I moved forward. But it was time to take back control. It was time to stop letting him live rent-free in my head. It was time to let go. I had always believed that love was enough to overcome any obstacle, but now I knew that wasn't true. Love alone couldn't fix betrayal. It couldn't heal the wound left by someone who had broken my heart so completely, and I wasn't going to keep holding on to a man who had shown me so little respect. So I made a decision. I was going to move on. I was going to reclaim my life, my dreams, my future. It wouldn't be easy. I knew that. But I also knew that it was the only way I could find peace. I had spent too much time waiting for Ethan to come back to me, for him to apologize, for him to make things right. But he wasn't going to do that. He had already made his choice. And now I had to make mine. The decision was made. There was no turning back now. As hard as it was, as much as it hurt to admit it, I knew that moving forward without Ethan was the only way I could begin to heal. I didn't need his apology or his promises anymore. What I needed was to reclaim my own life, to rebuild what he had taken from me. And with that realization came a strange sense of peace, a calm that I hadn't felt in a long time. The first few days without Ethan were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. But I kept reminding myself that this was the first step toward something better. I wasn't going to let the pain define me. I wasn't going to let it keep me from living the life I deserved. The support of my friends, especially Sarah, became my anchor. She was there through every moment of doubt, every tear, every question that crept into my mind. "You're stronger than you think," she would say, reminding me that I wasn't alone. I took a long, hard look at my life. I hadn't been living for myself. I had been living for the version of the future I had built with Ethan. Now it was time to build my own future, to embrace the woman I had become in the process of all this pain. Weeks went by, and slowly the wound began to heal. It wasn't a perfect healing, and it wasn't without its scars, but it was progress. I started focusing on my career again, spending time with my family, and allowing myself to feel joy in small moments. There was no room for regrets anymore, only for moving forward. Then, one day, as I sat in my favorite coffee shop sipping a latte, I looked out the window and realized how far I had come. It was a sunny afternoon, the light spilling over the city, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of the past on my shoulders. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sunlight on my face, and I realized that I was ready for the next chapter of my life. Ethan's name no longer brought me pain. His memories no longer haunted me. I had finally let go, and as I walked out of that coffee shop, stepping into the world I was reclaiming for myself, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to be okay. I was going to be more than okay. I was going to thrive.